There are tons of business podcasts to choose from, but only one has the stamp of approval. Kristen Stampini is South Florida's leading real estate entrepreneur and your trusted source for everything real estate.
I would like to welcome my listeners and thank you for joining us today for another episode of my podcast, The Stamp of Approval. I'm Kristen Stampini, co-founder of the Stampini Platinum Real Estate Group with RE/MAX in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm also a certified real estate coach with Craig Proctor and the owner of Global Virtual Real Estate Assistants. You may have heard us on the radio. I'm a real estate investor, a national trainer and public speaker, and a certified inside sales agent trainer. Actually, today we started training 20 new inside sales agents. So the Stamp of Approval podcast was launched to share and educate other realtors, consumers, and other business owners across North America by sharing a lot of value and content to all of you, to all my listeners in each and every episode, as well as share my experiences and my triumphs and failures and strengths throughout it all, and able to expand your knowledge on everything real estate, business, sales, and mindset oriented. I know that a lot of you know, but I basically started my life over at 40 years old, bankrupt and broke. So this is a lot of things. And today, fortunately, I am a millionaire. So I am able to share all of this with all of you and all the things that I've gone through in life. And, just to brush yourself off and pick yourself up and start again. So today, one of my favorite attorneys of all time and friend of mine, and actually client, is Eric Eastham. Eastham Law Offices is a family business practicing for over 30 years and specializing in estate planning, probate, asset protection, trust and estate, administration, business organization, real estate, and contract transactional law. Attorney Eastham prides himself in creative estate planning and business organization, often saving, winning, and protecting his clients and their assets while maintaining a personal relationship with them. Eastham also believes in educating his clients and the surrounding community on the importance of proper planning. And we personally know that in our family because the Eastham Law offices have also helped us in putting everything together for ourselves and protecting our assets. So today, our topic is going to be about homesteaded properties, owning in a trust, and protecting investment properties. So the options you have and the pros and cons and the possible issues you can run into and how you can really protect yourself. So, welcome, Eric.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you today. And also, I've been, letting people know that you're going to come on, and they're so excited to hear everything that you have to talk about. So why don't we start with homestead properties here in Florida?
So when it comes to homestead properties here in Florida, I get a lot of questions that say, well, what about this? What about that? I'll have clients come to me and say, well, I think I might have a lawsuit, or I think that I might have debt, or maybe I don't have debt. Maybe my child has debt, or maybe my spouse has debt. And in truth, when it comes to homestead property in Florida, there's really not too much that you really have to do because homestead property is already 100% protected pursuant to our Constitution. That is something that makes Florida very, very unique. Not all the states have that kind of protection. That's the reason why you have people like O.J. Simpson who decided to make his homestead down here. There are 3 people who can take your homestead property, and these are the people you want to make sure you pay. So if you have a mortgage on your property, you pay it. Otherwise, what do? They foreclose on it. Property taxes as well. You want to pay your property taxes. And if somebody performs a service on your home, puts a roof on it, the plumber comes in, they can obtain what's called a construction lien. So outside of those people, you want to make sure that those are definitely the people you pay. But outside of that, don't really worry too much about it. The real concern should be more about, well, what happens when I can't take care of myself anymore? Or what is the best way to pass this property on to my loved ones or people I care about?
Let me just ask you a couple questions, if that's okay. So I don't have to worry about if unfortunately, like I ended up having to do. At the time, I didn't own anything, but I ended up having to claim bankruptcy way back in the day. And and I actually had just moved here, just recently or just at that time. And you don't have to, how about that? And also, how about IRS? How about the IRS?
The IRS can take your house. So definitely pay the federal government. They have supremacy clause. They can pretty much come and do whatever it is. The IRS does not make a habit of making people homeless, but it doesn't mean they don't have the power to do it. So if you are on back taxes, you need to talk to a tax lawyer and you need to come up with a plan on how to take care of that, because the Florida Constitution is not necessarily going to protect against IRS. The issue with bankruptcy is, so what we advise a lot of our clients to do is we recommend that most of them put their home in a revocable trust. It's a trust that allows them to have complete control. They can change it, they can get rid of it, but it will protect the home against their incapacity and their eventful demise as far as it avoiding probate. But the key is, whatever legal arena you are in, you need to make sure that you're most of the time at least asking the lawyer you're talking to if they are talking to another lawyer that's outside of their realm. So in the bankruptcy, there is a case out there actually where the bankruptcy trustee allowed the homestead to be used because the homestead was in a revocable trust. And the situation was that the bankruptcy attorney knew nothing about trust law. The bankruptcy trustee, they don't really deal with trusts either. And nobody thought to actually call the attorney who deals with trusts. So when we do a deed and we put a deed into our trust, we specifically cite the revenue ruling that states if your home is in a revocable trust, it's still going to be given homestead protection. So the lesson there is not all attorneys specialize in all things. I don't know a single attorney who does specialize in all things. So I'll get lots of calls, not just from clients, but I'll get calls from divorce attorneys who say, my clients have this trust issue. I don't deal with trust. I get calls from bankruptcy attorneys who do. So if you're somebody who is looking at debt down the road and you're saying, I don't want to lose my home, the focus should be, am I talking to the right person? And I need to know how to properly protect it. If it is homestead, other than those 4 we talked about, pay your mortgage, pay your property taxes, pay the worker on the home, and make sure you're paying your income taxes, you really should not need to worry about it. Homestead will be protected in bankruptcy in Florida. Georgia, for example, I might not be 100% correct on this one, but I did have a client who filed for bankruptcy. Because she was in Florida for such a short amount of time, she had to use Georgia law. And at that time, Georgia's homestead protection was 10%. And what that means is that you can lose your home, they will sell the home, and you're entitled to 10% of the proceeds. Not such a great deal.
Wow. That's crazy. So, a lot of people, and myself included, think that this is complicated, to talk to an attorney, and it's expensive, and, to protect myself, and it's, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So if I buy a home, and as we just talked about, and I'm protected except for the couple things that you discussed, do I have to worry about really talking to an attorney if I'm talking about homesteaded property?
The point of talking to an attorney when it comes to your home is making sure that your home is going to stay protected from the bad things that can happen to you outside of debt. So we're talking about incapacity, and we're talking about the guaranteed event, your ultimate demise. Those are the 2 things we know about, right? Death and taxes, those are the guarantees in life. So that is the reason to speak with an attorney. For most people, their home is their most valuable asset, and they want to make sure that asset is going to be passed in the event of their sudden demise. The problem that most people have is that they say, well, I'm not 80 yet, and I've got my magic ball, and it will tell me exactly when I'm going to pass away. We see a lot of problems with young families. We have mothers and fathers with children, and in truth, they probably need estate planning more than anyone. If you think about it, if somebody if they're elderly and they have adult children, and their children have to go through a court process because they didn't properly plan, those adult children are going to be out of pocket, but they're probably going to be fine. Whereas if somebody has a minor child, minor children can't receive money. So if you leave a home to a minor child, that home is going to be observed by a court, and then the court's just going to let that child do whatever they want when they're 18. And most people, when you ask them, what would you have done with that when you were 18? Most of them say, I would have blown it.
Yeah, that's true.
So we need to make sure that we're planning for all people. Estate planning is not just for the elderly. It's more apparent that they're probably going to check out first, but that's not a guarantee. If you ask anyone in a room, raise your hand if you know somebody who passed away before they should have. Everybody raises their hand. And then you say, how many? 2, 3, 4? The problem is that's not me, but that's exactly what those people were probably thinking too.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you. And okay, so let's kind of change it a little bit, and let's talk about owning in a trust and protecting investment properties, and the options you have and the pros and the cons, and really how to protect ourselves.
Okay, so when it comes to protecting ourselves against guardianship and probate, guardianship is the legal process that will always take place for a minor child. They're just legally incapacitated. They're not allowed to take care of themselves. Or let's say somebody's in a car accident, they can no longer take care of themselves. If you don't have your property in a trust, then a judge will be making decisions on what happens with that property and how it benefits you. Whereas if you take the time to plan, you can choose who makes those decisions for you, and they'll always be for your benefit. Probate is the legal process that must take place to move an asset from a deceased person to a living person. It takes a very long time. Average time in Florida, 8 months to a year, and the cost is extreme. Florida attorney fees are statutorily driven. The statute says what an attorney should charge, and the base charge is 3%. So if you think about, we're talking about homestead, the average home down here is probably about $350,000. So just to move that property from one person to the next, what are we talking? $9,000 to $12,000 just for that. So if you own anything else, which most people do, it'll also be 3% of that. And we get to charge hourlies and all these other things. So the best way to plan is to avoid those processes by putting that home in a trust. The two things that I see people do that are a big mistake, I see a lot of people just deed the property to their children, not realizing that when you deed the property to your child while you are still alive, your child is taking that property at the basis. That's what you bought the property for. And when they sell the property, if they sell it for more than you bought it for, they have to pay a capital gains tax on that.
Wow.
Now, there are exceptions, but it can really be a nail in the coffin for a lot of people when they say, how much is this going to cost me just because mom and dad wanted to do a deed?
And people just don't know it.
They just don't. They just say, this is how we avoid court process. That's the only thing. And then the other thing we see a lot is the do-it-yourselfers. I'm going to go to LegalZoom. When clients say, can I do this on LegalZoom? I say two things. One, go ahead and read LegalZoom's disclaimer. And if you're still comfortable, by all means proceed. And two, anybody can walk down the street, look left, look right, and say, there is no way my life is like that person. I have different obligations, liabilities, family members with special needs or special circumstances. So if you have such a different life than everyone else, why should your life be summed up in a copy form that you can get on LegalZoom? Those are the two big things that I see happening with homestead property. And I see it too with investment property. When people want to create their LLC, all they do is they just go to the state. They say, I'm going to file my articles with the state. And guess what? Now I'm a company.
But why even, if I'm buying an investment property, why even do that? Why can't I just put it under, my name?
There's nothing stopping you from putting it under your name. But the proper thing to do is to incorporate, and there's different ways to do it. The two that we highly recommend is LLCs are great. Partnerships are better. Limited partnerships are better. But both have different functions, and they are set up differently. Where I see a lot of people setting up a limited liability company on their own, why do people do it? Well, it sounds great, right? Mm-hmm. There are words in the name that I love. I love limited liability. So if I can be limited in my liability, let's just go with that. The problem is that they don't take the extra steps of understanding, well, why is there limited liability and how does it work? Limited liability law is so new in our entire country that when you go to apply for your government identification number for a limited liability company, there isn't even a checkbox for limited liability.
Wow.
It says, Choose corporate or choose partnership if you're a limited liability company. They don't even have their own designation yet. And people don't understand that. And because it's so new, not all of the states treat limited liability companies the same. Florida, we are lucky. We had a case come down in 2010. We call it the Olmstead case. And it made it very clear on how it will protect. And the one that we see all the time is, I own a limited liability company. First question, who owns it? Me. You own it all by yourself? Yes, I do. You do not have limited liability. The reason why is that what that Olmstead case said is it said that if you own the property in a limited liability company and the problem that you're experiencing is on the property, then yes, the limited liability company will work for that purpose. It's going to say that if your tenant sues you or if you hire someone to work on the house and they sue the company, because that's who owns the house, then they will be limited to what the company owns. The problem is about all the other liability you may have in your life, and you want to not only protect the property, you don't only want to protect the property, meaning the tenant or the worker suing you and insulating yourself from that. It's an investment property. You've bought it so that it will become a nice piece of investment for you later in life. Maybe it's building income now, but the ultimate payoff is what? You want to end up selling it and making a huge reward at the end. But if somebody can take that from you, then it's not going to work. So how do we keep people from taking it from us? We create this limited liability company. So if you hit someone with your car, I always like to say if you run over a surgeon's hands, because those hands are worth millions and millions of dollars.
That's true.
If you do that, what do? Well, first, your insurance should kick in. By the way, not everybody has car insurance in Florida, even though they're supposed to. But if your insurance isn't enough, if you run over the surgeon's hands and he sues you for $2 million and your coverage is $300,000, they're not going to say, okay, got the $300,000 from the insurance, see you later. They're going to say, what else do you own? And they're going to look for real estate in Florida. And if you own real estate in an LLC and you are the only owner, they're going to have access to that. And the reason why is that the law is written this way. It says that if you create a company with other people, members in a limited liability company, then it would be unfair to those other members to use the company asset to satisfy a claim that had nothing to do with the company. You hitting the doctor with your car had nothing to do with company business. The argument fails if you're the only owner. We're not being unfair to anyone. So it's okay to take it. And that's what the Olmstead case said.
Well, and so when I first started, and obviously I did come to you, and so when I first started buying investment properties, several years ago, and I was able, fortunately, to save money to buy them in cash. And one of them was owned by my company. And I had come to you and I had, because I didn't, have a lot of assets, but I was starting to buy things cash. And one of them I had bought in my company. So it was Florida Home Sweet Home. I had put the property into that. And I had no idea that if somebody was going to sue my company, that they could take my property too, right?
Right. And that's the reason why some people will, maybe it's overkill, but some people will be ultra conservative and they'll say, I need to put every single one of my investment units in a different LLC. And you can do that, but it becomes very expensive because at the very least, you're paying the state a fee every year for every entity. You should be paying a registered agent fee as well. It's just a requirement of the statute that the registered agent have office hours between 10 and 12. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it's pretty helpful. It's pretty helpful. I see a lot of people come in and say, well, I'm my own registered agent. I was like, okay, where's your place of business? My house. I just list my house. But okay, are you there most of the time between 10 and 12? No, I go to work. I go to my real job. And so you're failing parts of the statute. So for just talking costs, you should probably pay a registered agent to receive service, because most people don't want a lawsuit delivered to the place where they actually work. But back to what you were saying, some people want to be ultra conservative. They want to put every unit into a different entity. Why do they do that? They do that because if the problem happens on the property, they will sue the owner of the property. And if the owner of the property is an LLC that owns 4 or 5 units, all of those units are now subject to the lawsuit. Whereas if the only unit that LLC owns is the one that created the problem, and you have 6 or 7 other units in other LLCs, they're not going to be able to get to those.
Yeah. So what we ended up doing is now that we own multiple properties, we actually did create them and have them in each in a different LLC. So, but if there's a mortgage on a property, so if you have an investment property and it has a mortgage on it, is that still as important to put it in an LLC? Why or why not?
It becomes less important. Mortgages are great debt. So mortgages are going to take priority on the property. So if you have a brand new unit and you're afraid of being sued or it being taken from you, going back to the car accident situation, what else do you own? Well, I own this unit, but technically the bank has first rights, a priority. So if you're going to sue me for this unit and you win and you foreclose on the unit, all the money's going to the bank. And any attorney who graduated from law school is going to know we don't even bother with that. So mortgages are good debt to have. So in answer to your question, it is less of a reason to have it. That being said, what are we doing every month? We're slowly paying down our mortgage. We are building equity into our unit, and the time will come where the equity becomes very valuable to you. And the longer a company has been in existence, the more bulk it starts to have. Because when people want to get to it and they hire the lawyer, what does the lawyer try to do? He tries to knock that LLC out of the way. We call it piercing the corporate veil. They try to say, Judge, they just threw this up and they're not doing all the things that an LLC is supposed to be doing. I never was able to put service on them because the agent isn't a real agent. They literally filed this 6 months ago. And you know what else? They don't have corporate meetings. They don't do this. They don't do that. They're not walking and talking like a duck. I don't want them to be treated like a duck. So the longer you can have your entity in business, doing business things, it's going to have tax records, right? You're going to have to pay your members through a K-1. It is a cost, but it is important that the longevity of it will constantly make it stronger and stronger.
So you can basically, if you are out there and you do have them already in just your name, okay, and no protection, pretty much, that you can go back and put them in that property into an LLC at a later time.
You can. You cannot do it necessarily when you're in the midst of a lawsuit or a potential lawsuit. We call that a fraudulent transfer. I do get clients coming in, they say, I'm about to be sued. Let's protect everything. I say, well, now it's a little too late. The purpose of your business cannot be purely, I don't want it to be taken in a lawsuit. It can be your driving purpose, but it has to have a business purpose. An investment real estate is a business purpose. We're doing it to create income.
So you can do it, but you do. There are costs involved, also, just so everybody knows. Taxes, and you have to. You definitely. There are additional costs besides of putting it into an LLC or limited liability. Just so everybody is aware of that, you might want to check into it. And how about if you buy it into a 401k or something else? Is that covered already?
There are, what do you mean, is it covered?
Do you have to worry about somebody coming after the property if you buy a property in a 401k or a self-directed IRA or something like that?
Or a REIT? Are we talking about real estate investment trusts and stuff like that? So generally it should be fine because retirement accounts in and of themselves are also protected. It's a social purpose behind those laws that basically say if somebody's been saving up their entire life for retirement, we don't want them to lose it at the end of the race. So if you are purchasing it in the form of a retirement account, you're probably fine without needing to even create an LLC. The retirement account itself should produce it.
Okay,
produce
awesome.
The protection.
So closing up this episode, just give us, I always like to give our listeners just a couple things that they can go and do right now. So just give us a couple things that they can go and do right now that are not going to overwhelm them or anything else, and that are not going to be, something they can take away from this episode.
So if we're talking about our home, you should be talking to an estate planning attorney that says, what is the best way for me to transfer this home to whoever it is that you want it to be transferred to. That's step one. If the attorney gives you anything other than a rev trust, talk to another attorney. I do see a lot of attorneys create testamentary trusts. It's really a beefed up will, but it doesn't actually avoid the court because they want the probate for those fees. As far as LLCs go, if you're looking for investment property to purchase and you do believe you want to go LLC, you need to consider, are you buying into an HOA that's even going to allow it? There's also HOAs that aren't going to let you put a tenant in there for a full year. So before you get all excited about the property you're buying, make sure that your ultimate goal of how you are going to own it, because that's what asset protection is. It's not what you own, it's how you own it. Make sure you're going to be able to own it the way that you want to. And then the last bit of advice is, if you already own the property and you're thinking about putting it in an LLC, don't forget to talk to your insurance agent, because when that pipe breaks and now it's owned by the LLC, that insurance agent is going to say, well, we didn't insure the LLC. We insured you.
Wow.
So make sure that that happens.
Those are awesome tips. And one last question. What is your biggest high and greatest win?
My biggest high and greatest win was a client, and we spent a long time with this client, multi-generational client. So dad came in, he was worth probably about $15 million, and we created limited partnerships for him, which he did own some property in. And the advantage of limited partnerships is the government will immediately let you discount the valuation of whatever the partnership owns. We've gotten away with 25, 35%. So if you own $1 million property and you need to pass it on, you're saying, well, we didn't really pass on $1 million as far as the tax is concerned. We actually passed off $750. So it's a huge advantage. But for years and years and years, we were creating this, and I was getting pushback from their CPA, who simply wasn't knowledgeable in it. And he pushed and he pushed and he challenged me at every way and tried to get them to meet different lawyers that he wanted to be connected with. Long story short, at the end of the initial client's life, he passed away, and they were looking at a giant estate tax, and they had to still pay an estate tax. But instead of paying $8 million, they ended up paying $2 million.
Wow.
And that initial meeting where we sat down, the CPA was in that meeting in my office, and he said, well, it looks like this, and looks like the partnerships are going to be able to do this, so the underwhelming tax is this. And I just looked him right in the eye after 4 years of battle, and I said, so what you're saying is what we did worked? And he goes, yes, it did. And he has now been referring me lots and lots of clients.
Wow.
Took 4 years to get him to understand. But that's one of my biggest highs. And
That's
he had to admit it right in front of the client. It was great.
That is awesome. Okay. So basically, to all the listeners out there, I'm going to have Eric give you his information in case you have other questions or you want to sit down and get a free consultation with him, as long as you mention the Stamp of Approval podcast is where you heard him from. And he's going to give you that information to reach out to him. So how can they reach out to you?
So phone numbers are always easy, 561-395-6800. Again, 561-395-6800. You can also check us out on our website, which is Eastham Law Offices, it's plural.com. Eastham is spelled east like the direction, ham like the food. And emails are always fine too. The best one to use is EMJ Eastham at easthamlawoffices.com. If you do mention the podcast, as Kristen said, you'll get a free consultation, and we do offer flat fees for 99% of our clients. And for good estate planning clients, you usually get free consults for life.
So, you know what? Tell me what that flat fee means.
So the flat fee means that if a client wants to come in, they are going to know what the fee will be before we start work. I discuss it with them. I also discuss it with them before I actually ask them how much they have. The type of work that I do, I can pretty much gauge how much time it's going to take me. So the flat fee will be there, and the flat fee almost always will come with free consult for life, because we're planning your estate. It's not I sued somebody, goodbye, we're done. It's your estate, and your estate will change. And as it changes, as you get older, as you want your children to start understanding things, you will have the ability to pick up the phone or sit in my office and ask as many questions as you want. We only continue to charge when we have to produce new documentation. But if you're buying that investment property and you say, you know what, Attorney Eastham said that there's a specific way the deed should be titled, you're able to pick up that phone. Even if you're there at closing, you can pick up the phone and say, tell the title agent how my LLC or how my trust should be worded on this deed, and I'm happy to do it.
Oh, that's so awesome. And the one thing that I love about you guys is that you're a family business. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Dad started the practice when he was in his early 40s. He used to be in retail, and he got bored with it. He got very successful with it and sold it off and said, now I'm going to go be a lawyer. And he did a lot of things. And for me personally, I didn't know that I wanted to be a lawyer. For me, it was either go to law school or go to seminary, actually. So I worked at St. Andrew's Church in Boca Raton and their school as the youth minister and the ministries coordinator. And after about 3 years of that, I said, no, I think I'm going to go be a lawyer. So I've been working with my father for about 15 years now. We have family law firm isn't 100% true, as we do have some staff that aren't family, but they love us so much that we give them fake adoption papers.
Well, and
once
they
they've
act
been
like
around
family.
for a year. We adopt them. We adopt them verbally, and I do have a sibling that does work as well. Her name is Erin.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So I just love that they are family. I've worked with Eric and his dad, and Aaron and all the other family members that really aren't family members by blood, but are family members. And his office is awesome. And he's also been a client of mine. And he does all of our trusts and wills and estate planning and everything else. So I'm so excited that we had Eric today. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, listeners. Bye.